You are about to hear Baron Trump's Marvellous Underground Journey, Original Edition, by Ingersoll Lockwood, narrated by Luke Erlenbusch.
Chapter 1. Bulgar is greatly annoyed by the familiarity of the village dogs and the presumption of the house cats. His health suffers thereby, and he implores me to set out on my travels again. I readily consent, for I had been reading of the world within a world in a musty old miswritten by the learned Dom Fum, parting interviews with the elder baron and the gracious baroness, my mother, preparations for departure. Bulgar was not himself at all, dear friends. There was a lackluster look in his eyes, and his tail responded with only a half-hearted wag when I spoke to him. I say half-hearted, for I always had a notion that the other end of Bulgar's tail was fastened to his heart. His appetite, too, had gone down with his spirits, and he rarely did anything more than sniff at the dainty food which I set before him, although I tried to tempt him with fried chicken's livers and toasted coxcombs, two of his favorite dishes. There was evidently something on his mind, and yet it never occurred to me what that something was, for to be honest about it, it was something which of all things I should never have dreamed of finding there. Possibly I might have discovered at an earlier day what it was all about, had it not been that just at this time I was very busy, too busy, in fact, to pay much attention to anyone, even to my dear four-footed foster brother. As you may remember, dear friends, my brain is a very active one, and when once I become interested in a subject, Castle Trump itself might take fire and burn until the legs of my chair had become charred before I would hear the noise and confusion, or even smell the smoke. It so happened at the time of Bulgar's low spirits that the elder baron had, through the kindness of an old-school friend, come into possession of a 15th century manuscript from the pen of no less celebrated thinker and philosopher than the learned Spaniard, Don Constantino Bartolomeo Strepfolio Fidguinarius Fum, commonly known among scholars as Don Fum, entitled A World Within a World. In this work Dom Fum advanced the wonderful theory that there is every reason to believe that the inferior of our world is inhabited. That is, as is well known, this vast earth ball is not solid, on the contrary, being in many places quite hollow, that ages and ages ago terrible disturbances had taken place on its surface and had driven the inhabitants to seek refuge in these vast underground chambers, so vast, in fact, as well to merit the name of World Within a World. This book, with its crumpled, torn, and time-stained leaves, exhaling the odors of vaulted crypt and worm-eaten chest, exercised a peculiar fascination upon me. All day long, and often far into the night, I sat poring over its musty and mildewed pages, quite forgetful of this surface world, and with the plummet of thought sounding these subterranean depths, and with the eye and ear of fancy visiting them, and gazing upon and listening to the dwellers therein. While I would be thus engaged, Bulgar's favorite position was on a quaintly embroidered leather cushion, brought from the Orient by me on one of my journeys, and now placed on the end of my work table nearest the window. From this point of vantage, Bulgar commanded a full view of the park, and the terrace, and of the drive leading up to the porte cochere. Nothing escaped his watchful eye. Here he sat hour by hour, amusing himself by noting the comings and goings of all sorts of folk, from the hawkers of the gewgaws to the noblest people in the shire. One day my attention was attracted by his suddenly leaping down from his cushion and giving a low growl of displeasure. I paid little heed to it, but to my surprise the next day about the same hour it occurred again. My curiosity was now thoroughly aroused, and laying down Dom Fum's musty manuscript I hastened to the window to learn the cause of Bulgar's irritation. Lo, the secret was out! There stood half a dozen mongrel curs belonging to the tented tree of the baronial lands, looking up to the window, and by their barking and antics endeavoring to entice Bulgar out for a romp. Dear friends, need I assure you that such familiarity was extremely distasteful to Bulgar. Their impudence was just a little more than he could stand. Ringing my bell, I directed my servant to hunt them away, whereupon Bulgar consented to resume his seat by the window. The next morning, just as I had settled myself down
Sample complete. Ready to continue?